The water element in solo leveling Arise is by far the best in the game, and alongside Maylene Fisher and Alicia Blanche, Seo Jiwoo is one of the main reasons this element is so good. But it's also when you equip Seo Jiwoo with artifact sets such as the Burning Greed set that do make her so good, as this is by far her best one in the game, as on the 2 set effects, whenever you use a skill or anything that deals break damage, you can apply the Greed buff. And all this will do, which won't seem very good at first, is it'll basically increase the user's critical hit rate by 1%, which stacks up to 10 times. But it's once you've stacked that Greed buff 10 times, you can then utilize the 8 set effect perfectly. As essentially, once you've stacked the Greed buff 10 times, you can enhance it to become something called Burning Greed. And essentially what Burning Greed does, it will basically increase your whole team's and whole party's critical hit rate by 15%, and also all of their critical hit damage by 30% as well, which will not only buff Seo Jiwoo's damage by a ton, but also the rest of your team as well, which is amazing. But if you also wanted to run Seo Jiwoo as a DPS, the Burning Cutter set is also very good for her, as the 8 set effect is the most important set bonus for this artifact set, as unfortunately this set does increase the amount of damage you take by 20%, which is unfortunate. However, in exchange for that, you get a 30% damage dealt increase, which is honestly amazing. But then it's also the final bit of the 8 set effect passive that does give you way more damage as well, as in addition to the 30% increased damage dealt, you'll be able to increase your damage dealt by 0.2% every second, which stacks up to 100 times, which in total will be a 20% damage increase. And this buff is completely permanent, which once you've basically played a stage for 100 seconds, in total you can gain a 50% damage increase, which is obviously fantastic. And also, if you really did want to, you could even run her with Burning Blessing, because it does increase your whole party's damage and also recovers your team's HP, and will once again just show and prove how versatile Seo Jiwoo as a character is, as she can also be run with a great set like the Solid Analysis set, which gives you 15% extra break effectiveness on the 2 set effect, and then another 30% extra break effect whenever you attack an enemy that does have the elemental weakness to your character's elements. And then even sets like the Guardian set is amazing, because you can increase your shield strength as well as your whole team's damage whenever they have a shield, as well as also Noble Sacrifice, which can increase your own HP stat, which is really good because Seo Jiwoo is a HP scaler, but it can also buff your whole team's attack stat as well, which is really good. And then finally, of course, the Toughness artifact set is amazing, as the critical hit damage increase as well as the crit rate increase that she gets from the 2 and 8 set effect bonus does synergize perfectly with her kit, and especially her exclusive weapon, which I'll get onto in a little bit. So then let's talk about all of the stats. And for the main stats for her main artifact pieces, on the helmet you'll want HP percent, as she is of course a HP scaler. The body armor and also gloves will always give you additional defense and also additional attack, which is obviously a guarantee, so you don't need to worry about that at all. And then for the final artifact piece, the boots, you'll always 100% want critical hit damage, as your crit stats are very important when it does come to building Seo Jiwoo. And then for the substats on these pieces, it's going to be very self-explanatory. Things like HP percent, additional HP are amazing, because again, she's a HP scaler. Critical hit rate is a must, as once again, her crit stats are very important for her. And then other great substats would be things like damage increase, defense pen are also very good, but honestly, even things like damage reduction could also be very useful. But it's also things like additional mana points and mana point cost reduction are probably more important than damage reduction. But then for the main stats on her accessories, on the necklace, you'll always get additional HP, which is obviously very beneficial. For the bracelet, you'll always want water damage percent, as she is of the water attribute. And then the ring, of course, you'll want to run HP percent, as she's a HP scaler, but you could also run additional HP if you would like to. But then of course, finally, the earrings will give you additional mana points. But then when it does actually come to the substats for all of these pieces, critical hit damage is by far the most important one for her. But then of course, all of the other mentioned ones, things like HP percent are also amazing. And then of course, things like mana point cost reduction, additional mana points, damage reduction, damage increase, defense pen are all amazing. So next up, we have all of Seo Jiwoo's best weapons in the game. And without a doubt, Unparalleled Bravery, which is her exclusive weapon, is definitely by far the best weapon for her, as what you can do with this weapon is increase the user's critical hit damage by 5% just permanently, which can actually be increased up to 20%, which is a decent increase in itself already. But the best thing about this is the second part of its passive, which basically says when the user uses Water Dragon Rush, Lightning Kick, or the heavy attack versions of those skills, you can increase your critical hit damage by 1%, which stacks up to 20 times, which at 0 dupes is a 20% increase into your critical hit damage, which at 0 dupes gives you a 25% crit damage increase overall, which is okay, not the greatest thing in the world. But when you get it to max dupes, not only can you get the additional free 20% crit damage from the start of its passive, but essentially on the second half, the crit damage increase goes from 1% all the way to 6%, which can then also be stacked up to 20 times, which means as opposed to stacking 25% crit damage in total, you can actually stack up to 140% critical hit damage, which turns her into an absolute monster. And then for her other weapon options, the durable sharp water gun, which is currently free in game right now. This weapon will be her next best thing, as you can increase your own QTE skill damage by 2.5%, as well as your actual basic skill damage by 2.5%, which is really, really good, as she does use a ton of them. And then both of these values can be increased up to 10% each, which is overall a pretty decent damage increase. But then if you're newer to the game or you're struggling a ton for weapons, then the Ancient Grimoire can also be very, very useful, as you can increase your power gauge acquisition rate by 12%, which goes up all the way to 32%. But if you actually really want to take Seo Jiwoo to the next level, you then also have to level up her correct skills, as especially when it comes to skills like Lightning Kick, which do a great amount of damage and also deal weak break damage, but can be increased once you use Heavy Attack Lightning Kick, which increases your break effectiveness by 50%, which is obviously amazing. But it's also when you pair this skill with her second dupe, which increases your break effectiveness by 50% and will increase the user's break effectiveness when using Heavy Attack Lightning Kick by another 50%. Overall, this skill is going to do a ton of break damage and just damage in general, which 100% definitely turns her into one of the best breaking characters into the game. Water Dragon Rush is a very similar story and is the second best skill you want to level up, as it's practically the exact same skill as Lightning Kick. However, as opposed to increasing your break effectiveness, instead you apply a shield equal to 5% of the user's HP to your entire team, which is really, really good and helps sustain your team very nicely. And then for me personally, her third best skill is going to be her core attack, which is Twin Dragon Strike, as all it will do is just weak break damage. But what it also does, it can also apply the training buff to you, which once you've then stacked that training buff 3 times, you can apply Water Dragon Training, which allows you to completely reset your basic skill cooldowns and spam your skills a ton and change them into different versions and buffed versions of your original skills, which overall makes her core attack play a very, very key role in making Seo Jiwoo as good as possible, so you can just keep standing there with your super armor and spam as many skills as possible to get as much damage and also break damage as possible. But then her ultimate skill is also pretty good, as it will do a ton of damage, as the damage can go from 1484% of her max HP all the way to 2226% of her max HP as well. And then when it comes to the rest of her skills, you have things like Burst Punch, which also can apply a training stack, which is also really good. Her support skill, Water Dragon Lightning Kick, is really, really good for dealing medium break damage and also applying a shield equal to 10% of her HP, which overall makes all of her skills definitely worth leveling up. So then finally, to end off this video, we have Seo Jiwoo's best team and also Synergies. And of course, as I mentioned at the start of the video, she is a part of the water element and is a character that makes it very good, which also will make Maylene Fisher and also Alicia Blanche amazing characters for you to run her with, as of course Maylene does amazing stuff for your whole team, as she can increase the amount of water damage your enemies will take, and then she can also increase your whole team's core attack damage as well, which is really good for Seo Jiwoo, as she does use a good amount of them. But then also when it comes to Alicia, she is also amazing, as not only can she freeze, but she can also provide another shield to your whole team, just like what Seo Jiwoo can do. However, this one is much weaker, but what it can actually do is remove debuffs as well, which gives you debuff cleansing for your whole team. But then also characters who will work very nicely with Seo Jiwoo, especially if you want to make her your main DPS. You could 100% run Min Byung-gu as one of your main supports on a team, as through Min Byung-gu's ultimate, his Heavenly Blessing buff will increase your team's damage and also critical hit rate, which is obviously amazing, but it's also the fact that he can also apply a critical hit damage buff to your whole party as well. But then finally, of course, something that is very important when building any team in the game are the shadows that you actually use. And overall, if you're using her best team, which is like the Mono Water team, then overall the best shadow you want to use will be actually Tusk, as Tusk basically buffs all of your team's core attack damage by 30%, and considering Maylene buffs your core attack damage, as well as also pretty much all of Alicia's damage comes from her core attacks, it does mean this will be very, very important. But if you're using a team where Seo Jiwoo is more of a main DPS, then I would either recommend you go for Igris, as he can increase all of your team members' critical hit rate by a set amount. But then finally, for the two best supportive shadows that you want to use with pretty much any Shadow Authority leader in the game, is going to be Serbi the Cerberus, as Serbi does offer an amazing debuff which is called Combustion, which will deal damage equal to 50% of the user's attack every 3 seconds. But not only that, it will also increase the amount of damage the enemy takes by 5% as well. And then finally, easily probably one of, if not my favorite shadow in this game, we have Iron, as Iron is definitely by far the best supportive shadow in the game, as he does offer a defense decrease, but it's also his Iron Angry skill, which is also very good, as you can apply a shield equal to 10% of the user's max HP, which is granted to all of your shadows, which overall 100% in my opinion makes this the best team and also all of the best shadows to use when you're using Seo Jiwoo. So there you have it, that is a completely updated build guide for Seo Jiwoo. And overall, if you did enjoy this video or you found it just useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe and click the link down below to support me as a creator, as it will help me out so much. But more importantly, I will see you all in the next video. Peace!